Hello, and welcome to this special episode of the Leadership Mastery for a New Era TV series. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at management performance. And to help us to do so, we have an expert in this field, Ken Pasternak. Ken's unique background combines experience in executive development, management consulting, and corporate banking. He has lived in 6 countries and worked with executives in the public and private sectors all around the world. Ken focuses on building high-performance organizations through visionary leadership, team effectiveness, and creating a winning culture. He is the co-author of the book Performance at the Limit: Business Lessons from the Formula One Motor Racing, which served as an inspiration for the BBC World Television series Formula for Success. And the book argues that the world of Formula One is a powerful mirror to the world of management, where high performance relies on strong leadership, clear goals, selfless teamwork, innovation through constant learning, and winning culture. So Ken, welcome.
David, thank you for that wonderful introduction.
My pleasure. So let's cut straight to the chase and go to the book. In Performance at the Limit, you describe 3 dynamic activities that pertain to F1 teams and to all organizations: innovating, transforming, and integrating. I understand the importance of the first 2. What do you mean by integrating, and how do you relate that to leadership and management?
Well, thank you for asking that, because it was a difficult decision when we wanted to talk about leadership. And at the time that we were writing the original version of the book, I looked at all the leadership literature, and I was getting quite bored, actually, because everyone was saying the same thing. And then we hit upon a notion that we saw in one of the team principals named Patrick Head, who was running the Williams Formula One team. And when we interviewed him, Patrick said, "My job is to take a helicopter view of what's going on in the business and pull all the pieces together. Because after all, no one else has that view and that perspective." And so we came on the notion of the leader's job in a complex, high-performance organization is to integrate all the separate pieces so that they fit together in a realistic and strategic way.
So in the world of motor racing, this amounts to, give us some examples of...
Well, a good example would be when Ross Brawn was at Ferrari, and they were extremely successful. They had Michael Schumacher as their driver, and they had won multiple championships. And we visited with Ross and Jean Todt at Maranello in Italy. And he said, the thing that people don't understand is that when we look at a Ferrari, or any other race car for that matter, it's not just the gearbox or the aero design or the tires or the engine, the power unit as they call it now. It's the whole. It's a Ferrari. And so it's all about pulling all of these separate divisions together. In the business sense, one of the requests I often get from CEOs is to come in and help them break silos that form between their functional divisions, marketing and finance and manufacturing and distribution, because we tend to work with the people that are in our functional area. And so integrating is all about working across silos, breaking down the barriers, because after all, the customer doesn't care that someone is working in a particular department. It's how you bring that product, that service to the customer by integrating all of the pieces together in an effective way.
And this requires an enormous amount of collaboration and collaborative leadership.
Well said. It requires trust, strong communication, willing to share knowledge, not holding details and information to oneself or trying to gain power or influence, but being open and candid with your colleagues. Because in the Formula One sense, you can make the most powerful engine that any other team could have, but the car may not perform at its best because all the pieces have to work together. So the engine team within the team have to coordinate with the aero design team so that there's enough air coming across the car to cool the engine, for example. Even if it's the most powerful engine, it may not be the best for the car.
So this is all getting the high-performance car and driver on the track?
It's all about getting the best car on the track that will go as fast as possible. And it requires, as we said, collaboration, communication, knowledge sharing, and laser-like focus. One of the things we talked about in the book is a lesson in focus, focus, focus. And the best example we ever had of that was from Frank Williams, Sir Frank Williams, who started and ran the Williams team up until very recently. He's still around, but he's not actively involved. And Frank told us, whenever anyone came into my office and asked me to sign a check for more than £5,000 for some investment or some use of our capital, I asked them one question. And the question is, will it make the car go faster? And I have a wonderful time when I'm speaking with audiences of executives to ask them to think about, if the similar situation was occurring in your organization, what question would you ask your people that really emphasizes your focus and what's really important to your business?
So the forward vision and the result are primary.
Well, Formula One is easier than some organizations and some businesses because the vision is the fastest car possible. But you're right in saying it's about results and measuring results. In Formula One, they measure everything. There are about 120 sensors on the car which send back data through telemetry to both the garage at the track and to the factory at the home country of that team. And they're constantly analyzing this data and rethinking this data and doing predictive analysis of this data to help improve the performance of the car.
Right. So in terms of the modern company and organization, we have non-stop disruptive change in our businesses now, in the global economy generally. And it's the ability to respond agilely, quickly, flexibly, adapting, etc.
Yes.
But in a very fast time frame often. And then I think what fascinates me about Formula One, for example, is the pit stop. You know, when the tires have to be changed, and they go in there, and it's all has to be changed in this incredible amount of time, short amount of time.
Yes.
Where with this incredible teamwork, and I wonder, you know, how does that also has parallels with the modern organization, right?
Very much so. The pit stop is a remarkable piece of activity from Formula One team. 20 or 21 people waiting for a car to come down the pit lane at 60 miles an hour to stop at the right spot. And those people change the tires off and to old tires off, new tires on, and the car takes away in approximately 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Faster than you can blink.
Wow.
And what does it take to get that? Well, it takes, firstly, a lot of practice. Formula One teams practice maybe 1,500 or more times a year, both at the track and at the factory. It takes review of their procedures and constant learning and upgrading. A few years back, the Williams team were not very good at it, and they did a very, very systematic review of the placement of people, of the placement of the equipment, having the right person for the right job, which is, of course, a crucial element of any effective team.
Yes.
Clarity of roles and responsibilities of who's doing what and when, and then practice. And they videoed themselves, as you would in any improvement methodology, and they became the champions. They did a 1.92 second pit stop back in Azerbaijan a few years ago. And just the other day, last week, they did a 1.97, I think it was.
Wow.
So they're not the fastest team. In fact, they're the worst team in terms of results this year, but they're the fastest team on the pit stop.
Do they ever make mistakes?
It's very important to understand that we're talking about the technology of the car, but it's people who are developing the car and racing. And one of the stories we tell often is about creating the no-blame culture in an organization.
Uh-huh.
And that came about because many years ago, Williams, again, were racing. Nigel Mansell was the driver. He was winning the race, and he came in for a pit stop. And they had a little problem on the right rear tire. But the car took off anyway down the pit lane, and his tire came off. And we spoke to the person who was in charge of that pit stop, and we said, "What did you do?" He said, "We isolated the problem, not the person. We found a way to focus on what went wrong and what we could do better rather than point the finger and blame."
Mm-hmm.
And this no-blame philosophy resonates with all the organizations I talk to. In another sense, people call it psychological safety.
Right.
Because if you're not allowing mistakes to happen and learning from those mistakes, people aren't willing to take risks.
And you work together with a lot of leaders, a lot of organizations. How do you take this kind of philosophy, the no-blame culture, how do you take that into the way that you work together with leaders?
Well, it's something which differs from culture to culture,
Yes.
national culture as well as organization culture, because I'm very surprised to still find in this day and age, some leaders are willing just to point blame and fire or demote people for making a mistake.
Yeah.
And they don't realize the harm they're doing to their corporate culture, because no one will be willing to put their head above the parapet and be creative and innovative if they fear that there's reprisals for making a mistake. So it really is something that is driven through technology firms and many, many more nowadays, that you have to give people some freedom to allow them to take risks and maybe make mistakes. But then again, management's all about being in enough control so that the mistakes don't put the business at risk.
Yes.
And it's also about not letting someone make the same mistake twice, because that is just not acceptable.
Yes. So in Performance at the Limit, you comment that there are leaders at every level of an organization. And what do you mean by that?
Well, it's something not only in Formula One, of course, but one sees in all organizations. You know, leadership is not necessarily defined by position and hierarchy. Leadership is an activity where you inspire people to want to follow you or follow something you're doing. And one of the examples I often use is when I go to a business and we're having lunch and we go down to the cafeteria and you walk by the bulletin board and you'll see a sign that says something like, "This Saturday, come on out for a fun run for charity. Sign up here." And you'll see 50 names signed up. And people will raise money for whatever charity. Now, it's never the CEO who puts that sign up on the board. It's oftentimes maybe a secretary or someone working in the cafeteria or somewhere else in the organization who shows true leadership by getting a vision, communicating that vision, and inspiring people to want to join in. And taking it to a more active level in organizations, if we want to build organizations where leaders throughout the organization are empowered to take decisions, to be accountable, be responsible, they're acting as leaders.
Yes, and this model of leadership, empowering leadership at every level of the organization and empowering teams, sharing from the top throughout the organization is very much the forward momentum of companies now. This no longer the top-down kind of reporting up at different levels, etc., etc. Very much collaborative teamwork is the name of the game, and in such a multicultural world, plural world that we have as well, and with so much change.
And as you said earlier, if we need to be in this very disruptive world, change world, agile as organizations. You cannot wait till decisions are filtered up to the top. You need to empower your leaders at all levels to make quick decisions. And Formula One is probably the prime example of the need to make quick decisions. You don't have time during a race to cogitate for hours on what we're going to do to change our strategy. Decisions have to be made simultaneously. The other thing we see, right now it's, there's a race going on a Friday, they practice twice. On Saturday, they practice in the morning. Saturday afternoon, they do qualifying. Sunday morning, they practice. Each of these practice sessions are an opportunity to learn, to make some decisions and move on with those decisions.
Right.
And that's a constant cycle that's very fast, very rapid in Formula One, which we don't see in most organizations. The very simplest model of business is planning, doing, and reviewing. Many organizations get very good at planning, maybe over-planning. The doing, of course, is execution based on your capabilities and your market position and so on. But the reviewing is something we often see lacking in organizations.
Yes.
They move on to the next activity. Ross Braun told us when he worked with one of the hospitals to help them improve one of their procedures based on pit stop methodology, he asked the question, when do you review what went wrong or what could be done better? And he was told, when somebody dies.
Wow.
And that's quite a dramatic statement. And it's a statement which resonates with other companies too. They wait till something seriously goes wrong before they actually review. Formula One teams are in a constant cycle of planning, doing, and learning from what they've done, and changing and executing, being very agile in order to improve their performance.
It sounds like modern companies would have a tremendous amount to learn from a Formula One performance.
I'm doing my best to share that message, yes.
Well, thank you for that, Ken. It's really been very enlightening and tremendously interesting. So thanks to Ken, and join us again for another episode of Leadership Mastery for a New Era at Disruptive Live.